They say there's a fraternity ritual so deadly, only one man ever lived to tell about it, and that man told me everything. My father used to have this friend named Charlie Porter. He was a small guy, quiet, always a little twitchy. I remember that he had this way of looking over his shoulder, like something he couldn't see was following him. One night, when I was about 16, he told me a story about his bone-chilling college fraternity experience that I think about often. Charlie said that the fraternity he belonged to in college wasn't around anymore. It got shut down after something strange happened. Something bad. Back then, they were down to just 9 members, and they were bringing in 2 new pledges, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. For the initiation, they drove way out into the countryside to this old abandoned farmhouse. This place had a grisly reputation. People said 2 college kids had been murdered there not long before. The killer had never been caught either. But Charlie and his friends used it anyway, for the thrill of it. They gave Jack a candle and told him to go all the way up to the 3rd floor. Stay for 1 hour, they told him. No talking, no noise. If your candle goes out, just sit in the dark for a while and then come back down. From the outside, the others could see the flame moving through the windows. They saw the flicker of candlelight move past the 1st floor window, then the 2nd, and finally, as Jack's flame approached the window on the 3rd floor of the house, it suddenly went out. Watching from the woods, the boys waited. 10 minutes went by, then 20. Nobody came out of the house. All was silent except for the wind threading its way through the hollow frame of the house. Figuring maybe Jack had just been screwing with them, the boys sent Ernie up next. Charlie never forgot the way Ernie looked, tears on his face, eyes wide, the moonlight catching every trace of fear as he approached the house. Just like Jack, Ernie's candle flickered past each window, the 1st floor, the 2nd floor, until it reached the 3rd, and went out. Then, Ernie didn't come back either. After waiting an hour for Jack and Ernie to come down, the rest of the boys went in with flashlights after them. The house was silent as the grave, empty looking, but Charlie recalls that the house did not feel empty, as if some unseeable presence watched them in every dark corner. On the 3rd floor, they found a wide open attic space. No one was there, but in the thick layer of dust that covered the floorboards, they saw footprints leading to a room at the back. Inside that room, no Jack, no Ernie, just smears of fresh blood on the floor and an open window. There was no ladder outside, no rope, just a straight drop onto cold, rocky ground. They searched the woods, the house. They searched for hours, but it was like the 2 pledges had been erased off the face of the earth. The boys waited for them to show up the next day, laughing about the prank they had pulled. But when the pledges never showed up, the boys decided they needed to get the college and the police involved. The police conducted a thorough investigation and interviewed each person involved. The Dean of Men was very angry with them and ordered the fraternity to be disbanded. In the end, no one ever found out what happened to Jack or Ernie. Charlie said the surviving brothers eventually moved on, graduated, got jobs, got married, and started living lives far away from that little college town. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, something else started happening. One by one, the surviving members either died or went mad, some in twisted accidents, some in ways that didn't even make sense. Pretty soon, Charlie received a call about one of these incidents. One of the brothers, Tom, had been found torn to shreds in a closet the day after the anniversary. What was left of his body was drenched in blood, but police could find no signs of foul play. When Charlie set the phone back on the receiver, he remembers a single tear rolling down his cheek. He was the only one left. When Charlie had finished the story, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm still here, still breathing, but some days I wake up feeling like I'm not here at all anymore, like something stayed with me after that night in the house, and soon I'll have to confront it." Charlie started acting strange not long after that night. His lips were twisted into a grin that never seemed to fade. Not friendly, not even nervous, just wrong. And there was something in his eyes, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. Then one day, he was just gone. No warning, no goodbyes. His front door was locked from the inside. Nothing was missing, except him. And when they checked the attic, there was blood. Not a lot, just a single trail leading across the floorboards and stopping at the far wall. There were no footprints, no handprints, and there was no body, just blood and silence. I thought Charlie's story was just one of those things you hear from someone who's seen too much and talked too little, but I couldn't shake it. The details, the way he said it, it didn't feel like a story. It felt much more like a warning. So I started digging. That's when I found the work of a man named Ernest Baughman, a folklore scholar from Indiana University. In 1945, he published a paper in the Hoosier Folklore Bulletin Volume 4 called The Fatal Initiation. I didn't expect much, just another dry academic essay. But the more I read, the colder I felt. Baughman documented 12 versions of this exact story, different towns, different names, but the structure of the initiation ritual was always the same. A group of fraternity members, a haunted or abandoned house, pledges sent in with matches or candles, a staircase leading somewhere they were never meant to go. In some versions of the tale, the pledges vanished without a trace. Others were found torn apart. A few just went mad, gnawing on bones found in the attic and screaming about things they could see but couldn't describe. Professor Baughman recounts one version where a pledge is told to retrieve a jewel box from the top floor, only to be found curled in the corner of the attic, clutching the box, his fingernails bloodied down to the bone. According to Baughman, the story doesn't end with the pledges. In most versions, there's a curse, just like the one Charlie spoke about. Every year on the anniversary of the initiation, one of the survivors goes mad or dies until only one is left. And in 9 of those 12 accounts, that last survivor is the one telling the story. My stomach dropped the moment I read that. I could feel my spine tense up and my blood grew cold. I realized then, Charlie hadn't told me a story. He confessed something real, and the thought that I'd sat beside him, listened to him while he was under that terrible curse, it felt like I'd been touched by it too. Like whatever had followed him out of that house was near me too at that time. I started looking closer, mapping the states where Baughman's informants said they'd heard the tale: Indiana, Maine, and most commonly, Ohio. Within Ohio, informants had heard the story in Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Warren. Warren? That town was only 25 minutes from where Charlie went to college. That's when it hit me. Charlie hadn't just repeated some half-forgotten fraternity legend. He'd lived it. His story wasn't the first, the kind that the others were based on, twisted from, watered down from over time. Most of Baughman's sources said they heard the story around 1940. One even dated it to 1935, but even he admitted the tale was likely older. Something passed around long before anyone bothered writing it down. Over time, the story took on a life of its own. It became so well known that in 1984, author Alvin Schwartz introduced a version of it in his infamous book, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The one with those terrifying Stephen Gammell illustrations burned into every millennial's brain. But what most readers never realized is that Schwartz didn't make it up. He just collected what was already out there. Stories like Charlie's. The locations were always vague. Large universities, unnamed fraternities, ghost stories with missing details. But now, for the first time, I had a lead that felt solid. Charlie's College, Warren, that stretch of northern Ohio, and the possibility that the house from Charlie's story wasn't just part of the legend, it was the source of it. I decided that I had to find it. The house, I mean. If it was still standing, then this wasn't over. It wasn't just some cautionary tale from decades ago. It was a very real trap still waiting to be triggered. I arrived in that small college town on a cold day in October. The wind came in low and mean, carrying the kind of chill that clings to your skin. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I figured if the house was real, someone, somewhere, still remembered. I started with the college itself, speaking with students and faculty. Most brushed me off or had never heard of anything like it, but a few, the older ones, got quiet when I brought up the story. Off campus, I hit up the local diners, hardware stores, and corner bars. That's where I met an older man named Robert. He was leaning against the wall outside a gas station, lighting a cigarette with hands that looked like they were carved from a tree bark. I asked him if he'd ever heard of a farmhouse used in a fraternity initiation gone wrong. He took a long drag, then said, "Out past Route 9, left on Ridge Hollow. You'll see if you're looking. But folks around here don't. Not anymore." When I asked him why, he didn't immediately answer, just tapped the ash off the cigarette, gave the ground a good hard look, then looked into my eyes. "You're not planning on visiting it anytime soon, right?" I didn't know what to say, so I thanked him for his time and went on my way. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel off the highway. No matter what I did, I couldn't sleep, so I drove back to campus and talked my way into the college library, saying I was working on a graduate folklore project. The basement was where they kept the microfilm, racks of newspaper archives older than anyone who worked there. It took hours, but eventually, I found it. An article dated November 22nd, 1962. The headline in bold black ink, "2 students vanished during off-campus initiation. Search ongoing." Of course, their names were there. Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. The article described a search of the surrounding woods, dogs picking up a trail near a vacant property, and a tip about a third-floor window left open. But it ended with no conclusions, just speculation, concern, and a statement from the university distancing itself from the unnamed fraternity chapter. I remember staring at the faded microfilm screen and feeling the room go cold. This wasn't folklore. It was a police report. The answer to that burning question, was this fact or fiction, was staring me right in the face. By dawn, I was driving down Route 9. The turnoff for Ridge Hollow wasn't marked, but I found it. A winding gravel path swallowed by trees. The deeper I drove, the worse the reception got. The woods grew tighter, and then, through a clearing, choked in weeds, I saw it. 3 stories tall, windows boarded, but one of them, near the top, it looked like the wood had been ripped from inside. The house sagged with age, like it had been holding its breath for decades, waiting. I parked about 30 yards out and stepped into the brush. The air was still, too still. You could hear no birds, no wind, just the house, just silence. And then I saw it. The front door was slightly open, like it had been waiting. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, trying to convince myself it was all a coincidence, that Charlie had just lost his mind, that Baughman's paper was just folklore, that Schwartz was just retelling an old tale. But then, I realized I'd taken a few steps closer to the house without thinking, like something was pulling me in, slow, almost hypnotic. And then I heard it. A low, guttural grunt coming from the broken window on the 3rd floor. It wasn't human, but it wasn't quite anything else either. I didn't wait to hear more. I jumped in my car as fast as I could and drove straight home. I haven't been back since, but I think about it every night, because if this story is still being told, in journals, in books, in whispers around a campfire, then maybe that house isn't abandoned after all. Maybe it's still waiting, patient and silent, for the next pledge to wander in and fall under the curse. They say some fraternity initiations are doors to a darkness no one should open. Maybe you think it's just a story. Maybe you've already been touched by it without knowing. If you find that old house, the one swallowed by shadows and choked by weeds, don't enter. Once you cross its threshold, the curse will cling to you, and by then, it will already be too late.